that they're going to have the enforceable ability to then say, okay, we fixed this part of the system, but the system is one huge, connected entity. We're not going to accept, continued county and state flows that are impacting a system in a negligent way that we've, upgraded our components of. I just keep trying to equate it to people, just like water and sewer. I mean, we carry, $30–40 million worth of debt service right now on necessary upgrades. We just talked about a couple of $1 million worth, and this system isn't grossly different than that. It just certainly hasn't been looked at, and I think that's the state's issue that's being mandated down by the feds is this system hasn't been looked at like water and sewer has been looked at over that same period of time. No entity, us or any other jurisdiction, has not managed this subgrade piping system the way that they've managed water and sewer over that same period of existence. They just haven't.
Can I inquire, Kristen brought up a good point. I know we're dealing with MDE, but is this ultimately a federal mandate that's being addressed by the states, or is this strictly a Maryland state mandate?
It's a federal mandate through EPA, but what they do, my understanding is they lay out to each of these states that drain into the Chesapeake Bay, they lay out goals for them to reduce pollutants, and then the states develop their own individual plan for how they're going to accomplish it.
Okay, so and the reason I asked the question is because obviously we're now having EPA run by somebody whose major goal is to get rid of the EPA. And so my question is, assuming the EPA said, you know what, this is a stupid regulation, we're going to get rid of it, do we anticipate that the state of Maryland would follow suit, or do we anticipate the state of Maryland would say, hey, you know what, the feds are a bunch of idiots when it comes to the Chesapeake Bay, and we're going to continue independently to do this? And I think that's an important question, especially when it comes to talk about Hagerstown and Washington County. You know, I look at some of these estimates, like a big box store paying $12,000 a year, and the first questions I come up with in my brain are Pennsylvania and West Virginia going to have these same taxes as we do? Because if the answer to that is no, then you might as well slam the door on economic development around the state of Maryland. Having said that, I mean, I believe we did make the decision at the budget time that we have to do this study. Because one thing is clear, if we're not going to raise revenue by way of this, then it's clear that there's only one other way we're going to raise revenue. Either that or cut out all the expenses that we have that are related to stormwater management. And I don't think anybody thinks that's practical or a good idea, but I think we need to stay in touch with our federal and state legislatures to see where this whole thing is going.
I think that you asked the question in a manner that suggests that it was federal legislative action that executed this process.
That's correct.
And it wasn't.
That's what I was
This
asking.
was legal proceeding brought on by various environmental organizations.
Okay. And
that basically, the courts got tired of having the cases go to the EPA for the EPA to tell the state to do something, the state saying, hey, we're doing something. I think they just got tired of it and said, look, the court has decided that runaround is exhausted, and you are going to be mandated to do this. So I think it's a little different if it were legislatively enacted by the feds upon the state to do something versus legally court-ordered to be mandated to do something.
Not to make it sound trite, but what you're describing to me is somewhat similar to what we're facing tonight with the arbitration motion, where a court has basically said you got to do it. And
Yeah, I think
the
that's a good
legislative
comparison.
body has ignored it throughout, and now somehow or another we're getting forced to do it. I'm talking about the tax now, the stormwater management fee. Thank you.
going back to your comment about Pennsylvania and West Virginia, I know Chambersburg implemented one 2 years ago.
Okay,
So they have a
good.
stormwater utility.
Well, I mean, that's positive. It's, I don't know about West Virginia though. I would be
Well,
surprised if they enacted
given-
it.
It's hit or miss.
Given what the court decided, those jurisdictions that contribute to runoff to the bay, which West Virginia is one, are gonna be subject to the same thing. No one gets to escape this. And, unfortunately, Maryland has decided that, hey, we're gonna go ahead and do what we have to do before they end up footing the entire bill. So it's on us to make these improvements or corrections, to reduce our pollutants and our runoff.
I think Lou really raises some important issues and good questions. And frankly, if the whole purpose of this is to clean up the Chesapeake Bay and eventually the oceans, it doesn't do us a bit of good to do that if the other states are not engaged in this. So I think the study needs to look at that aspect of the problem as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes back to what both of you said earlier, and I agree with as far as the county's position, make sure we're doing it in concert.
Yeah, it'd be
We're
nice
not
if
the
we could
first
get them to
hand
share in
out.
a rate study.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, at least a
Definitely
percentage of it,
think
yeah.
Let us reach out to
Yeah.
them and then we'll let you
Yeah.
know what they.
And see where they're at
where they're
also. So like you said, we're not, obviously we want to get ahead of it before we get behind it, but also don't want to be the first man in the boat and everybody else is, you know, in a better position than we are economically.
Who does these studies?
So put out the RFP for the
Right.
study.
Find out.
Direction of the council.
It's less engineering, it's more actuarial type work. that they do.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll be
you,
back in
guys.
touch.
Did you, were you able to get in touch with that guy, Salisbury?
Yes.
Oh, good,
Yeah,
good.
sending some stuff today.
Oh, good,
You
thank
always
you.
bring such sunshine to the table.
It's always nice to know we're ahead of the game.
Yeah, in that case, maybe.
Jim, you're still up. Quick claim, 115 and 125 North Prospect.
Yes, the staff received a request from the Hagerstown Rescue Mission. It might be easiest if you go to the map or the diagram near the end of the memo. The Rescue Mission owns property, up at the corner of Church Street and North Prospect. And on that diagram, you'll see that they currently own the property that's numbered as number 125, and they also own the parcel numbered as number 115. And in between those two pieces of property, there's a little alleyway. And it really has not been open to the public for several years. It's been fenced off down behind the sidewalk on Prospect Street. The Rescue Mission would like to have the city quitclaim that alleyway so that they can better make use of their property and work those buildings together a little bit more easily. We did some research, and it turns out, even though it lines up with the alley on the other side of Prospect Street, there's no record that this particular strip of land ever was a public alley, was never accepted by the city that we can tell. So it's questionable whether the city would have any claim or rights to it, but we sent the request out to the different city departments to see if anyone would have an objection if we gave up our rights, if we had any. The light department has a guy wire and an anchor close to the alleyway, and they said, we're fine if the alleyway goes away, but we'd like to get an easement there in case we needed to go back in the future and do something with that alleyway, or that guy wire. The only other issue that came up was one that Kathy Marr raised, which is number 115 is actually a separate parcel as it stands right now. And that means that it could be sold separately from everything else if the Rescue Mission wanted to do that. If this alleyway goes away through quitclaim, and then the Rescue Mission, for whatever reason, would decide to sell off 115, it really wouldn't have any access to get to the rear of the building without driving across other lands that they control. So what Kathy threw out as a suggestion was, if we're going to do the quitclaim, we'd like to see an easement established, an access easement that would let people come in from Church Street across those rescue mission properties to get to that parcel. That way, in the future, if the mission would decide to sell that property off, at least that easement would still be there, so some other future user could get to the rear of that property. So that's basically the request, and they have representatives here from the rescue mission as well, if you have any questions for them about why they made this request or what they want to do with the property.
Well, this does not seem like it would be very functional as an outlet. If you had to run trucks into it, it seems awful narrow. Was it 12 feet?
It's more like 10, I think, paved, 10, maybe 12 in some areas.
So you probably wouldn't want to run a very large truck in there, so it doesn't seem to be very useful to the city.
The area behind that you were talking about, adding an additional easement for potential future access if needed, is that all currently by the rescue mission as well, or who owns that
It
property?
is, it is. They own, a couple of properties down the front on West Franklin that I'm not sure that they control, but
That
the
whole
big
block,
buildings
basically.
here,
Okay.
yes, they control them. Now,
Everybody okay with this?
Well, I am curious what you mentioned before, the gentleman right here, what is the plan, I mean, I guess, of why this has been requested? I would be curious of that.
We were looking at the feasibility of adding a new kitchen onto our facility. We were gonna go out where the alleyway is. We thought we had to start with. But, that was our idea. And we're just checking feasibility to start with, and then Fred Frederick said, this alleyway is here. Nobody knows who owns it, so.
It's a basic expansion,
Right.
what you're looking at.
I don't have a problem there.
Okay.
so what we do is we take these to the planning commission first and then bring them to the council. We're sort of doing it in reverse order. The planning commission is going to weigh in on this next week, but I think with the feedback from tonight, I doubt that there's going to be any concerns.
Can I ask you this? Do you all have any issue with regard to the right-of-way behind it?
No.
Okay.
Matter of fact,
That would be the
we
plan
said
that I'd like to see.
we could put two properties together if we had to, just make it one property.
And you're willing to do that?
Yeah.
Okay,
All right, thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
that works.
Speed monitoring system contract with Breckford Corporation. You'll like this one.
Good afternoon, Mayor,
Same one got me.
City Council,
Hey, Chief, how you doing?
City Administrator. Hope everyone's rested after their break of respite we've had for a few weeks. Let me kind of go over our new contract with our speed monitoring enforcement program HPD is managing and has since its inception in 2014. The new contract is going to be a 3-year contract. Currently, we have 12 cameras in the city limits of Hagerstown. Each camera now our current contract is $3,500. The new contract is $3,100, a savings of $400 per camera, which is roughly about $4,800 a month. You extrapolate that out for the year, it's about a savings of $58,000, roughly. It's significant for us. The terms are much better for us. And the longer contract, there's a byproduct of less staff time to do it and renew it every year. And that's significant in itself. The camera program has been very robust. It's helped to change behavior. and ensure safety and security for our children at our school systems throughout the city. So I'm confident that this contract will be advantageous, not only for the city, but as we move forward with our automated speed camera program. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Okay. Okay. If I could move on to the red light camera program? Is that okay? Obviously, we strive to provide safety and security for the citizens of our city. That's our foundational mandate. In accordance with this EOS, we're beginning a red light safety program within the corporate limits of the city. We have joined, as you are aware, and which you approved with the Howard County Regional Automated Traffic Enforcement Authority to manage this program. They're very good at it. They're probably the best in the state. We have recently been notified by the State Highway Administration that they conducted studies at 5 locations throughout the city. And based on their findings, based on crash data, they have approved us to install red light traffic enforcement cameras at those 5 locations. Those locations, which should be in front of you in your packet, if you should have those. I can go over those packets. You know, these are all based on crash data.
And we don't have any locations.
The list of locations, hold on. The memo was in there, chief.
Okay, I can provide that to you. I can go over them to you and give you the locations now. First location is eastbound and westbound on the dual highway, Eastern Boulevard. As you know, on the dual highway, we've had multiple fatalities there and injuries, significant area. Also, eastbound and westbound on the dual highway at North Edwards Drive. Westbound, West Franklin Street, North Potomac. These are all state areas, state roadways. Northbound and westbound Virginia Avenue, Burhans, and Wilson Boulevard. And finally, westbound South Potomac and Wilson Boulevard, where we've experienced a number of different crash-related injuries and such. Just for your information also, an automated red light ticket is $75. An officer-generated red light ticket is $140. If there's a crash involved, it's $180. That's just for your information. You know, I'm confident, again, this is a significant thing for us as a force multiplier when we look at traffic enforcement. As you know, we have, right now we have 107 sworn, we're mandated at 112. Utilizing resources to face the challenges that we have in the city are incredibly important for us. We have a force multiplier as a red light camera program and an automated traffic program. That force multiplier gives us the opportunity to do other things. Doesn't mean that we still won't do traffic enforcement, you know, as we've done traditionally in this country in many different areas, and we'll continue to do that. But these specific locations give us an opportunity to continue to monitor other situations that arise throughout the city as we need to be deployed correctly. That's what I have on our program.
Chief, what was the 4th location?
The 4th location was Virginia Avenue, Burhans Boulevard, and Wilson Boulevard.
Okay.
And I can provide all these to you forthwith. The program is a robust one, and again, you know, our main goal is to change behavior. It's to slow people down, to provide safety and security for not only our motoring public, our visitors, and our pedestrians. It's really just that fundamental. It gives us the opportunity to do those things. And it does it in a very efficient way. You know, let me just tell you also about another byproduct of these cameras. There'll also be 24/7 video monitoring, you know. So it's an adjunct to our crime cameras that we have out throughout the city. That's important for us, you know, because people travel on our roadways. So for us to have the tools, an investigative tool of having cameras in different camera locations, that's an enormous plus for our investigators and our crime fighting needs. Additionally, with our speed cameras, with the new contract, the contractor is going to put in 24/7 monitoring with video also on those additional locations. So that's an additional 20 locations that we're going to have to add to our already robust crime camera and our citizen cameras that we have throughout the community. So it's a very positive thing for us. Again, that's all I have. Should you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Chief, what
Yes.
is the estimated time that any one of them could be up and running?
I'm hoping, within 90 days.
Okay.
I'm hoping within 90 days we'd have the additional red light cameras up.
Okay.
The first of them. We'll see how that works. They're, the company that you approved is a very good one, and that's what they do.
Okay.
So they have the expertise to stand those things up. So
Very good.
they're all single pole locations. They're non-intrusive, they're very, very good. Very, very good.
The bottom line of this whole thing is, you don't get fined if you're not breaking the law, right?
Absolutely.
And if you go through the light starting on yellow, you don't get fined.
That's correct, and that's the state law. We're not finding anybody. What we're doing is trying to change behavior from keep people safe. And that's exactly what we're doing. And the system is, again, it's a passive system. You stop for that red light, you're perfectly okay.
And the plan would also be to give enough notice ahead of time, signage notice. I know in some of the communities, such as Frederick, when you go through, you're pre-warned as well.
We will be doing that similar to what we did with our automated speed enforcement.
Okay, good.
We'll have a 30-day warning period, just like we did before. Under the red light camera program, there's no stipulation in the law that you have to do that. As I talked to Jason, I said that it was important that we comport to what we did before, so we're transparent. So we'll do the exact same thing. We'll have a 30-day warning period for the red lights as we did for the speed camera enforcement. Very good question.
Okay, good.
Very good question.
I have a question about the speed enforcement cameras.
Yes.
I was on the administration that approved them to begin with. My question back then was hours of operation, particularly holidays that fall on a weekday.
Yes.
Like Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's, things like that, where there is no school and there are no students in the schools.
Yes.
At all. But we still run our speed enforcement cameras on those days from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
We do. We do. And that's what we're allowed to do every.
I understand we're allowed to do that.
Yes.
I understand that.
Sure.
All right. I just know that if our goal,
Yes.
which I truly believed in.
Sure.
Was to protect our students who walk, in particular, to school, that having those cameras active on days when there are no kids in school doesn't reflect keeping kids safe. It reflects just the opposite, which is raising revenue.
Well,
No, it's
I'd have,
controlling the speed of the particular.
I would have a different take on that. I would
I'm
say
sure
that,
you
the school students still use the school facilities for a variety of different things. And there are different events on there, that happen during holidays, that there may, the school may be doing it. I think it's perfectly reasonable to still run it Monday through Friday. Our system runs from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
8 p.m.
8 p.m., excuse me, 8 p.m.
It should
We
run
don't
till
run
6 p.m., but it
What's
runs
that?
till 8 p.m., yeah.
Well, there are school events that go well into the evening.
I understand that, too.
And I understand your position. I think it's perfectly reasonable to run it, Monday through Friday. Those,
To address the mayor's point, once the camera was in place for a year, and let's just take the camera there in front of South High.
okay.
Did anyone come back after a year and say, okay, there are 10,000 cars? That's probably not, there's 2,000 cars a day that go past the camera. Let's use that number. And right now, we know that there are 50% of those vehicles, 1,000 cars a day, going above the magic number, 37 miles an hour. Did anyone come back a year later and say, since these have been in effect, that number has now gone from, out of the 2,000, the 1,000 going over, that number is now reduced to to 300 or 400. I mean,
I can't speak to what happened in 2014 or 2015 or 2016. I'm not sure what the data is. I will tell you this, is that if the camera was not being productive, we would take it out of service, because it costs us $3,100 for the camera.
But being productive, meaning producing results of ticketing people, and I use this example, and the reason I say this, in May 2015, the town of Myersville, we just refinished Main Street, and one of the issues when you remove 120 potholes is everybody, suddenly starts to drive faster. So we had an old camera system in place, and we looked at two options. And one option was we institute speed cameras, and the other option was we institute radar signage enforcement. And I'll just use this as an example. So we did a count, and the count daily in each direction, there were 1,200 vehicles going north and 1,200 vehicles going south. And it was about the same every day. It was with commuting traffic. It was, 90% is the same vehicles. And I was a little bit astonished by this. Anyway, about 10% of the traffic daily was going over the magic number, over the 37 figure. The net result is, if you institute speed cameras, we could net about $120,000 a year in revenue from catching those folks. I think what a lot of folks don't understand is, if you have the speed camera, you can't also have the reduced speed during school hour radar signs as well. You can't have both. You can have one or the other. So we opted, because it was only 10%, we opted to go with the radar flashing. So anytime anybody hits that straightaway and is going more than 25 miles per hour, the radar flashes. So just last month, I came back and I compiled the numbers and said, okay, in 2015, before we had this mechanism, out of 1,200 cars a day, 600 were going over the magic number. When we instituted the radar flashing, it went from 600 a day, or 50%, down to about 130 vehicles a day, or about 10 to 15%. So it actually had an effect of actually reducing the speed of vehicles, the average driver, by 70%. And I just use as an example to be able to come back and say, because we get this question all the time at this table, is, what are the numbers? If it's continuing to calculate tickets and continuing to produce the same revenue, is it actually reducing speed? Versus if you put in radar flashing, nobody likes to trigger that radar when they go by it, and it has completely changed 400 to 500 vehicles a day's worth of driving habits for the better. I just want to make sure that if we're doing that, it's actually changing the driving habits for the better.
And I think that number that you're looking for reflects some revenue generated and the loss of revenue generated at speed cameras that we currently have installed. Northern Avenue is a perfect example. That revenue dropped like 30%. So it did have the effect that we were trying to produce, which was to slow people down in those school districts.
I don't know.
The overarching goal is to change behavior. That's it. That's the overarching goal. I can tell you in my experience, and I have a great deal of experience setting up red light cameras in Washington, initially in the inception, is that when we had a lot of traffic fatalities and serious injuries, our red light camera program reduced those dramatically. Having a flashing sign, albeit may be good, it's not going to change behavior.
I'm fine with the flashing. I'm fine with the red light. I'm talking about the speed cameras in the school zones, because, and again,
And/or speed.
And again, for me, if I had to do it over, I would have picked the same thing again. I'd have picked the flashing radar in that particular instance, because I've been able to see that visible presence has changed that behavior drastically. And I use the one at South High. You know, when you're going through, whether you're a commuter or you know, happenstance to be on that road, there's just the box. You know, there is no physical presence. So all I want to know is if the box is having those same levels of results that a flashing radar sign, at least in my experience, has actually had. And somebody's got to be able to
I
pull
think-
that and say, okay.
I think from what the mayor said, it's the reduction of revenue, and maybe Michelle could,
And I
talk
don't
a
know, I'm
little bit
assuming
more.
we had those numbers from last year and the year before
Right.
at
Sure we
each one
do.
of those locations. And all I'm saying is if it's $10,000 this year and it was $10,000 last year and it was $10,000 the year before for some particular location, I don't really know that that's actually slowing people down and having the effect of changing driving behavior.
And Chief, if I could,
Yes, let me just add something. In those camera locations, we have not seen any serious injuries in those general areas. That's anecdotal, but there's no empirical data out there in any of these studies throughout the nation that does not support, you know, automated traffic enforcement. You know, in particular in an urban area in a city, it's an enormous, and you can't discount the force multiplier that we have with having the camera system out there, putting a sworn member out there to do traffic enforcement for albeit an hour or two. It may have a very short-term effect, but it doesn't have the long-term effect that we have with the cameras. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that's great information. One of the things that does happen is every single month, Breckford sends a very numerous amount of statistical data. You have an ombudsman as well as a sworn officer, Cope, who is over this program. And not only does Officer Cope look at every single violation and approve it before a citation can be issued, they are also monitoring those statistics on every single camera location every month. There have been specific locations where they can see the number of violations and they do averages, like daily averages, weekly averages. When it is dropped, now I don't know if there is also a count of total vehicles coming through that same time period, but the actual number of violations that are occurring is being recorded, and they are looking at that. And we have, over the last, since it was implemented in April of 2012, we have moved camera locations. So the boxes may stay, but if we get an area where the numbers of citations have dropped below a certain threshold, and it looks like that they, you know, appear to be working and helping to control that, we have moved those cameras into another box in another location. And we don't, even though we have 12 cameras or 11 cameras when we first started, it isn't like from start to inception, they've stayed there. And what we can do is go back and pull the information, Chief, if you would like, where 2 years ago, the state implemented an annual reporting requirement where we literally have to list like the number of errors, the number of citations per camera location, how many months it was at every single camera location, and we can pull that and send out the prior 2 years to this group, if it would help.
For me, I'm assuming Breckford did an original
There
traffic
was
count
an original
analysis.
study, yes.
And for me,
And the
it would be
state.
important to see that original traffic count analysis. I'm sure they did it for like a 2-week period at each location, just a particular location. And then a comparable 2-week period, because I'm sure they issue those monthly statistical reports of that same period now 4 years later, 5 years later, because that should say to me, I mean, traffic couldn't have changed that much. That should say to me that in May of 2012, 1,000 vehicles were going in direction X, and 700 of them were traveling at speed Y. And now in 2017, May, for that same 2-week period, I should be able to sit down and from that Breckford report see that there's still about 1,100 vehicles and now X number are going to speed Y. And if those numbers are the same, then I'd have to, again, ask in any one of those locations if it's simply issuing tickets or if it's changing driving behavior. And if it's not changing driving behavior and it's simply continue to collect on tickets, then it hasn't achieved the primary purpose of the goal.
And we have seen our numbers, we have seen the number of citations at camera locations drop. We've actually seen the amount of our revenue correspondingly drop. But I don't know that we've actually asked them to do an entire study again on the same 2-week period. Not only did Breckford do it,
Well, they don't need to
the
do
state
that.
highway had to as
I
well.
mean,
But we can.
that data is generated within those systems, you know, every month.
Yeah, they
We
have
can
that
ask for that
information.
information.
It'd be good to see. I still would like to revisit the hours of operation.
That's certainly your prerogative, you know, to do that. You know, whatever you know, that's your prerogative. You know, we'll enforce the program as you see fit. You know, we'll go from there. But let me just add something too, is that is very difficult to measure is that, you know, we have a lot of out-of-state people in this area here, you know, we have 2 bordering states very close. What's very difficult to measure is the change of behavior from the local residents and people that live here and that know this area, and the people that come from out of state that are traveling those byways to come in and out. That's very difficult to measure. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at these systems, because a lot of it has to do with out of state folks too.
Couple of questions real quick. And one thing that Councilmember Munson alluded to about as far as, you know, if you're not speeding, it won't go off. There's many instances that there is malfunctions, things of those natures. What is the process, I guess, with Breckford and the department for when that does happen?
Well, there's not many instances of malfunctions. I can tell you that uniformly. An officer reviews each citation, and that's the law. They have to review each citation, and they make the determination if, in fact, that's a real citation, and they issue that citation. The level of erroneous citations are very, very, very few, and sent in error. Very, very few. Matter of fact, it's a pretty rare occurrence that we have. The camera locations, when we look at very vigorously, is that, you know, our officer that is assigned to that program, that manages that program, has to approve each citation. He looks at every citation and see that, and there's photographic evidence regarding that individual going through that light. And if there is an error, and again, it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare.
It does happen. I mean, I know Breckford was the most recent company that had the contract in Baltimore City, which was shut down. I know they're currently in the process of bringing that back as well. But they had some instances where it was parked vehicles that got tickets, and things of that nature. You know, I appreciate everything you presented. I respectfully disagree, though, that it's in regards to safety. I think it is more related towards revenue, which I do appreciate, looking at alternative revenue sources. But the fact that some of the issues that have been in the past with some of these systems of whether it be malfunctions, whether it's, you know, your right to face your accuser, things of those natures. One thing you brought up about Washington, D.C., I read an article in the Washington Post, probably about the time you were there, in about 05 or 06, when Chief Ramsey was there, that accidents actually increased after the red light cameras were installed.
I was involved in '98 when we initiated the program. I wasn't involved in that.
All right.
I wasn't involved in that. So I can't speak to that.
The Chief Ramsey was very positive about the program, as far as, I think he was quoted as he'd like to have one at every intersection if possible. But the Washington Post did a study, University of Virginia did a study, and both of them came back and showed that accidents actually increased in regards to red light cameras and speed cameras. So me personally, I'm not sold on it, but I appreciate the information.
Sure.
And my only comment, just officially, is that yes, Breckford did have contracts with Baltimore City, but the actual extent to which Baltimore City and Breckford The extent to which the local municipality staff performed certain duties is very different from the duties in which we perform. And our officer doesn't just issue the citation when proof of one picture, it's multiple. If there's fuzziness, if they can't make out a certain letter, if it looks like it's too far away, if it's too dark,
As a
they're
bar-
more prone to disapprove than actually have erroneous citations and malfunctions.
And I'm sure they had bigger issues than hopefully we would have here, but the fact is, in 4 years of that program, it increased every year.
Right.
And all through the whole program was disbanded and shut down because there was like 1,200 tickets that were issued erroneously, and I mean, it was a whole,
And that has not occurred here to date. And we are tracking.
well, we don't have red light cameras yet either, though.
Will there be will there be signs installed to let people know that there are red light cameras?
Yes.
Any other questions for the chief?
Thank you.
Thank you, chief. Okay, I'd like to get a motion to go into the 19th special session, please.
So move, Mayor.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, we're in special session. First order of business is approval of an ordinance, land management code amendments, floodplain ordinance update. Now, someone needs to read the motion.
ordinance, Mayor, is that the first one?
That's the first one.
Mr. Mayor, I move the mayor and city council approve an ordinance to amend chapter 140 land management code of the city code. These amendments repeal articles 3 and 6 of the existing chapter 140 and replace them in total with new articles 3 and 6, which are appended to the attached ordinance. The newly updated land management code that includes these new articles 3 and 6 shall be identified as the land management code version 3.1.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
I have a question.
Motion carries 5-0.
Question.
Kristen spoke before we took.
And this isn't directly related, and you guys have obviously seen my emails, and I still would like some explanation as it applies to existing language, Article 3 definitions, and I know Steve's not here tonight. I do see Kathy back there, and I don't want to belabor it in this particular item, but if you look at page 312, 313, I'm still having a hard time, and I'm still struggling with how we define dwelling townhouse. I guess maybe I just am of the background and nature to believe that a townhouse is a separately deeded property that is connected to sort of a stick of properties. That isn't how we appear to define it in the city of Hagerstown. And as much as I've read the explanations, I look to, if you look at page 313, you got the dwelling multifamily, the dwelling quadruplex, the dwelling semi-detached. Even in the dwelling townhouse, it refers to without openings from basement floor to roof. And then if you go to semi-detached, it says extending from, without openings extending from the cellar floor to the highest point of the roof along a common lot line. Again, maybe townhouses are supposed to be all sort of owned by a single entity, but to me, I guess I've always thought in my mind that that's an apartment. And even have pictures that show lot lines for some of these other items.
These changes aren't referenced to that, though, correct? These are floodplain changes. Or you're just asking in
They are,
general?
but you're replacing Article 3 and Article 6, and this happens to be part of Article 3, and I'm just pointing out my confusion that remains on that issue.
When I drive by what I consider townhouses, I never look at them and say to myself, Well, if they're rentals, they're apartments, but if they're home ownerships, they're townhouses. I mean, when I go by, the townhouses, go ahead.
But as it applies to what's permitted within specific zoning districts, I guess I read it in that manner. In other words, and let's just take this specific case where we're talking about the Armad, I guess it is, and the application from the housing authority as it applies to that particular property. I guess had assumed that the townhouses are individual properties, much like, I don't know, and I could be wrong, maybe the ones over at Pangborn.
And that's,
Are
that's
they
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, are they separately deeded lots?
Yes.
But there are a number of them that are rentals.
And that doesn't
Right.
matter to me.
I
What
think
matters
it's
to me
separate.
is in that particular zoning district, apartments aren't allowed, but what's being indicated is townhouses can be apartments. Because they can be single,
Can be rented.
they can be single property. I guess what I'm saying is, in that particular zoning district, it says it allows, I guess, single family,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
like multifamily and townhouses. It does not allow apartments. But we can allow a builder to own townhouses in a single block as if they are apartments.
Right.
And that is very confusing in my mind.
But they aren't, they each have their own lot, right?
No.
No, I understand.
They're not.
No, they're not, I understand.
They're not
exactly what
going to.
Kristen's saying.
And we have a couple of townhouse developments that don't have their own lot because they're condos.
Right.
Which is a different definition in here. And I guess what I feel is happening is we're utilizing, or this particular developer, and maybe it's happened before, and I just wasn't aware, but this particular developer then is gonna own these sort of whole sticks that aren't gonna be individually subdivided. And I don't know whether that matters to him or not, I don't know, but that will then be apartments. I mean, they're permanently going to be
Okay, but let me make
apartments
sure
because
that-
they're not individually for sale, which in my mind, that's what I envision a townhouse being, is you go in and you individually buy. I don't care whether you buy it to rent it or live in it.
But what, and I hear what you're saying, but I can also see the workaround. Okay, we'll do separate lots for them all, and then,
And I don't care, that's fine, as long as there's some consistency then within that particular zoning district, which is, in my mind, supposed to be of a less dense nature, which allows only those
RMID.
specific types of housing.
but my point is, if the owner decided to divide them, we change the definition. So the end result is we have one owner who says,
Like-
okay, I'll do all separate lots, but I'm going to own them all, and then I'm going to rent them all out. Don't we end up with the same exact result?
No, because then there's that ability over time to actually individually have them for sale. In this case, they will be permanently,
I understand what you're saying. Do we have any
operated as
situations
apartments.
like that right now?
Forever,
Are you
in
aware of,
perpetuity.
Kathy?
We have, in Gateway Crossing, we have it with duplexes, where there's a string of duplexes on one parcel, which again was a housing authority development. And then the only other place where we have townhouses that are not on their own individual lot that I can think of right at this moment, Summerlin Manor
Which
and
is a
Cortland
private-
and their condos.
like a private gated condo community.
No, I hear what you're saying, Kristen. It's an interesting concept because I can see.
It's just a way to make apartments permissible then in
Yes.
the Armad district when they otherwise aren't.
I think you're right.
And that's how I read it, and I didn't really catch it until there was a couple of emails going back and forth. I was like, wait a second. That doesn't allow that, how is it occurring? And it's occurring because we're simply saying one can be the other. And when I look in here in Article 3, I don't read one being permissible of being the other. And then the response that I received, with great due respect to staff, was that there are these other instances in which this occurs, and I'm not aware of them. And I guess that was when it caught me off guard. I'm like, wait, well, Pangborn wasn't, and the ones over here on Cleveland or Cannon, I don't think they
Yeah,
are.
usually they are subdivided.
You know what I
into their
mean?
own
And so
lot.
they are because
No,
the point of them being able to be subdivided on individual lots is so that they are able to be sold individually over time, and function in that manner within that zone. In this case, they aren't going to be, and in fact, they're almost going to be prohibited from being in perpetuity. which is not, to me, the intent of the allowance of those types of units within that zone. And that's, I guess, the rub that I have.
Well, there's a chance that the changes that you're voting on tonight are just because of the floodplain changes.
I understand, that's why I was trying
Well, we're
not to
getting-
belabor, but I just,
But we are getting ready to go to the planning commission with the 2017 package of miscellaneous amendments. And so there's an opportunity to have this conversation with the planning commission and with the mayor and council.
And I
That
think
sounds
that,
like,
I
that
think
sounds like the
that,
time to have it.
think that conversation needs to be had.
Okay. Motion carries 5-0. Next up, introduction of an ordinance to amend the city code by adding chapter 37, police and fire department binding interest arbitration.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and council to introduce an ordinance to amend the city code pursuant to the charter amendment passed by voters in the general election on November 8, 2016. To add chapter 37, police and fire department binding interest arbitration, set forth procedures for implementing binding arbitration when the city as a defined negotiating union have reached an impasse during contract negotiations.
Second.
Discussion.
Let me just make this comment, Mayor, if I may. I noticed that Lou's suggested amendments are in this version, and they greatly improve it, and thank you, Lou, for pointing the need for those amendments out.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
we're just
Approve.
introducing.
I'm sorry?
We're just introducing.
Approval of resolution agreeing between the city of Hagerstown and Washington County Sheriff's Office for the execution of a secondary user agreement.
Mr. Mayor, we move for approval of a resolution to approve a secondary user agreement with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. The agreement will allow the Hagerstown Police Department to enter data into the Maryland Criminal Justice Information System of the Washington County Sheriff's Office.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Breckford ASC contract. This is your new one, that you just got this evening.
Mr. Mayor, we move for mayor and council approval of the renewal of the automated speed enforcement contract with Breckford Corporation. The new contract is based on the Calvert County, Maryland contract number 2016-105 awarded to Breckford in April 2016. I also move to approve a new collections contract with Breckford Corporation.
Second.
Discussion.
Before the vote here, there was some discussion just at this table a minute ago about finding some data and some information in regards to these devices.
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be prudent to possibly find that information before we move forward with approval of a new contract?
I think that was the reasoning behind Kristen's question.
Well, the question, my understanding was, are they actually changing behavior? That's just my, hey,
I understand, I
I'm,
understand.
you know, it's an uphill battle for me already. Everyone knows how I feel about it, so I mean.
Right,
if you
I
want to
know where
take
that
the
vote is,
that's
right,
fine,
right,
but,
right.
I mean, what are we asking for information to look at to see what effect they are or not having, if we're not even gonna look at it, but
Yeah.
that's up to you guys.
Anybody else?
I don't think the information we requested was regarding what company we're gonna use, so if they're not working, we can move them.
Well, I think
I don't think
if they're not
they're
working, would you
directly
enter into a
tied.
contract with any company?
I mean, I think that's a good conversation, certainly not one I would want to have, given the implications that it has on the recently passed budget at this time. For me, it would be weighed more appropriately, in anticipation of future budget discussions. That's just me.
All right, that's fine, that's your question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. Approval of city grant application to Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development Operating Assistance Grant.
Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval of a maximum of $25,000 in grant funding from Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development as requested in the presentation of the mayor and council on June 20th, 2017. There is no city match requirement for this grant. Mayor and council direct staff to complete the following. First, accept the scope of services as written by the state and the vendor once completed. Second, submit the grant application with the finalized scope of work as completed by the state and the vendor to the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. Third, award the consultant services to a vendor as selected by the state without a formal RFP process by the city of Hagerstown. Next, acts as pass-through agency for the grant as requested. And lastly, assist in preparing a sub-recipient agreement for all parties, State of Maryland, City of Hagerstown, and consultant, which reflects the responsibilities and duties of each party in the grant before any funds are exchanged.
Discussion?
Who's seconding?
Lou.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. City Administrator, any comments?
Nothing additional.
Let's start with Ms. Kell. Nothing? Oh, okay. I just found that odd. Mr. Alshire? Mr. Quarterman?
The only comment I have is, I'm sure most people saw in the last week, if not today or recently coming out, Gus and James moved out across the street, up to Waynesboro. Just want to thank them for their time, here. Hopefully we can find, another tenant for that spot. They were a product of the pop-up shop downtown movement, and hopefully, going forward, we can find some sort of, entity to replace that. So,
Luke?
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I had a whole lot of things to talk about, including the things we learned at MML and some other things. Having said that, I really only have one thing to talk about tonight, and that's, I guess, some of us here, when we leave here, are going to be going over to the funeral home. As many of you know, Teddy Bodner passed away. It's a very interesting soul, and Bob, I think you were mayor when Ted first moved into town, Ted and Vicky. And quite candidly, Ted was always a man ahead of his time and somewhat of a visionary. And it took many of us aback to think that somebody with his resources would move into Franklin Street and decide that that's where he was going to live. And he did everything in his power to turn that area into a place where upper-class folks would like to live. But unfortunately, it was fighting a losing battle for a long time. He got our ordinance for the cars taken care of and everything else. But Teddy, I know, and again, I have few things that I've accomplished in my career here. One of the few was after 3 years getting the council to pony up money and decide to have a July 4th fireworks event. And as soon as Ted Bodner found out we were going to do fireworks, that became his show. And every fireworks event that's occurred in this community for Hagerstown has been taken care of by Ted. And it was not inappropriate to do double negatives that we had no music this year.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Don McLean's song, The Day the Music Died, and those of you who don't know Teddy Bodner, Ted is a member of the Maryland Entertainment Hall of Fame. I was privileged to go down and see his induction. He signed people like the association, and during his youth, he was quite the mover. Those who didn't meet Ted until he was in a wheelchair and sickly had no idea the vibrancy of the of the man we've lost. So I just want to spend the time, and I don't usually do this, but Teddy Bodner was some kind of man. The last thing I'll say about Ted sort of reminded me of an oyster when I thought about it, because, you know, to get a pearl out of an oyster, there's got to be an irritant. And one thing is for sure, Teddy Bodner didn't mind being an irritant to City Hall if he thought that the result of that irritation would be that a pearl would be developed, and he did everything he could to get that pearl.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to note the passing of Ted, too. Good man. Did a lot for the city of Hagerstown, the people of Hagerstown, assisted by his wife, Vicki, and he's going to be missed.
He will be.
Thank you.
Yeah, Teddy was a friend, without a doubt. Good man who, and I have to tell you, his first encounter with me was not a polite one, which made it all that more strange we became such close friends. But we did, and I spent many a night on his stoop on East Franklin Street, trying to help him to help us, and I think he did. I thought about him at the fireworks last Tuesday night as they were going off, and he'll be sorely missed. Both he and Vicky, in their commitment to August-Toberfest and other events in the city of Hagerstown, we're definitely surely going to miss their volunteerism. So I'll be headed over after this to pay my respects. Having said that, I want to let everyone know, mark your calendar for July 25th. 2 weeks from today, we're going to have a retreat. The venue will be determined yet from 8:30 in the morning to 12:30 in the afternoon. I know some of us are going to have a problem with trying to adjust our schedules, but hopefully everybody can. And I want you to come to this. This is only the first one because we're going to have one, and we're going to have another one about 30 days later because we want to give staff time to respond to what our goals and what we want to see come out of this retreat and what we want to do over the next 3.5 years. So 8:30 to 12:30 on July 25th. Come prepared. Have your suggestions, complaints, acolytes, whatever. And like I said, we'll let you know where the venue is. We're probably looking at the Academy Theater, but we'll know for sure as we get closer. So, and that's all I have. So
I thought of something, I'm sorry.
you missed your turn. We went around a table.
I did, but I heard this Saturday at noon, right 11:30 on the square, is the Hagerstown Pride Festival 2017, so I hope to see everyone there. And yours truly is kicking it off at noon. So, just wanted to give them a shout out.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sure that's it?
Probably not, but for now it is.
All right. Thank you all for joining us, and we're adjourned.